Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, my finest friends. Welcome to episode 16 of the 11th season of the Tom Petty Project podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Brown. This is the weekly podcast that digs into the entire Tom Petty catalogue, song by song, album by album, and includes conversations with musicians, fans, and people connected with Tom along the way. I hope everyone's doing well. It's been a fairly busy week in the world, obviously, so I hope everyone's bearing up. Over on social media this week, there was a lot of love for Angel Dream, as expected. The wonderful Nora Haywood Olson commented, "A sweet and compact podcast, perfect for my morning commute." Well, thanks, Nora. The song is sweet and compact itself, not so treacly romantic that it leaves you feeling like you need a cavity filled, but heartfelt and to the point. A lovely ballad that should have had much more of a chance to be a hit. And I definitely agree with that. As a test, play this song for anyone in your life and see what their reaction is. It's going to be positive 99% of the time, and even if they're not huge Petty fans. And surely this would have attracted airplay if it had been released. Jack McNair responded to my thoughts about the percussion version of the song, saying, "Number 4 definitely has that signature Paul Simon beat to it, like a pared back version of 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover. It's a very underrated aspect of Simon's songs that no one ever talks about. It's hard to make an argument for anything less than a 10 on this song, the first of 3 such ratings for me on this album." And I think there are 3 10s on this record for me too, or 4, because it's obviously complicated by the fact that there are 2 versions of 2 different songs. So I'll be curious to hear which ones Jack gives top marks to. And on that, I've actually started posting on Facebook. If you're part of my, if you follow me on Facebook, you can go and put your votes or your ratings, scores, whatever you want to call it, and you can vote on that on Facebook. So look out for that as we move forward. As for Paul Simon, he had a superb ear for percussion and how to bring in the right people to make the noises he heard in his head come to life. Obvious Child is one of my very favourite songs of all time, and it's the percussion that obviously makes that song, no pun intended. And I love the story of how he came to write that song in that way. If you've never read it or heard it, I'll drop a link in the episode notes for you so you can read about The Obvious Child. Very cool. My executive producer, Paul Roberts, responded, "Great pod, Kevin." Thanks, Paul. "If you can't rate this song 10, you really shouldn't be in this group. Sublime." And thanks as always for listening, Paul. I would love to hear from any Petty heads for whom this song doesn't resonate. They will exist somewhere because not every song hits for every person, even the ones we imagine would be ubiquitous. So if you are in that minority, let us know why this one doesn't quite do it for you, and no judgment. Mary Beth Donnelly commented, "Such a beautiful, heartfelt song. There's something powerful about knowing he wrote this as a middle-aged guy who'd been through some stuff. Can't wait to hear the podcast." Well, hope you enjoyed it, Mary Beth. This middle-aged period of Tom's life definitely yielded some very resonant musical fruit, didn't it? Over on Instagram, at Sue Heights Bailey Brown left me this note. "All his songs speak to me, whatever I'm going through. It's like he was singing to me. No matter the circumstances, they can mean different things depending on what I'm going through." And at the end of the day, I think this is what a truly great songwriter should be able to do. Certainly all my favourites write timelessly and seem to touch me directly. To finish up social media, over on Blue Sky, the marvellous Steve Ursel wrote, "This is a great song. I particularly like the bridge, musically and lyrically. It's a very deft switch of pace and perspective." And I love this observation. The bridge in Angel Dream is a very slight switch of gears, but it's one that really adds to the song in an almost effortless and almost unnoticed way. And I should shout out to Steve Ursel. You hear his name most weeks because he comments frequently, and we share a love of Queen, the band, which is how we connected through my Seaside Pod Review podcast. But since then, we've hung out online a couple of times during Queen quizzes, and we've had lots of little side chats in the last couple-ish years, and he's just a top-notch fella. Just what we need more of in the world. It's thoughtful, positive, and incredibly supportive. So thanks for listening as always, Steve. It does mean the world to me. Okay, let's get into this week's song, which is the slightly downbeat 7th track from Songs and Music from She's the One, Hope You Never. Hope You Never is one of 3 songs that was carried over from the Wildflowers sessions pretty much intact. And it'll be fun to go back and try to find any differences between the 2 versions once we hit Wildflowers and all the rest somewhere down the line. I did give both versions a listen ahead of writing my notes for this episode, but I couldn't really hear any differences at all in the arrangement or the parts that are used. If anything's different, it would just be very, very subtle changes to the mix. But even there, I can't really hear much difference at all. So when we get there, maybe I'll have an epiphany. We'll see. Now, unusually for a Heartbreaker song, the first verse, complete with vocals, rhythm section, and guitars, comes out of the blocks immediately, with Tom starting to sing on the one end of the very first bar. We have that unmistakably Ferroni-esque backbeat with that whip-crack snare, which is very powerful and drives the song forward from the first note, with Howie Epstein's bass rumbling right along with it. The guitars in this song are very much just texture during the verse sections, with that very sparse arrangement allowing us to focus entirely on Tom's incredibly delicate vocal performance. The lyrics in this first verse really set up the entire premise of the song in fairly unambiguous terms. I hope you never fall in love. Hope you never get your heart broken. I hope you never fall in love with somebody like you. It's a fairly damning assessment of someone's character that he hopes that they find someone who isn't like them and won't break their heart. And it's an interesting way of bending the very common subject matter, rather than saying, I'm mad or sad that you broke my heart. By forcing the other person to try to take an empathetic viewpoint, it shifts the narrative over from heartache to outright blame, I would say. I hope you never have to be on the receiving end of what you did to me. It's an accusation, isn't it? Musically, there's a nice little twist in this first verse, in that it doesn't use the same chord progression of the rest of the verses in the song, except the last one, which dovetails it. The progression here is E minor, C, D, E minor, repeated twice, where the progression in the subsequent verses until the end is E minor, C, D, G, F added 9, then E minor, C, A minor, D, E minor. So I like that little one-off change, or two-off, because we get it at the end, because it keeps this first stanza really, really simple. And like Angel Dream, this song is structurally ambiguous. The passage that ends, ramble on and on, you could call that the chorus, but it definitely has more of a bridge or a C-section feel to it to me. In the first verse, we have a quiet, palm-muted, distorted guitar in the right channel, keeping time with the eighth notes that the bass is playing, and who I assume is Mike Campbell in the left channel, adding in some little licks for texture. In the second verse, we have Tom singing a harmony part and an organ coming in very, very low in the mix. On those different chords at the end of each half of the verse, we also have another brighter guitar in the right channel, along with the one in the left, and the palm-muted rhythm part in the middle. So it's laid up very nicely, but very simply. And I love the decision to go high on the bass on that last chord change before the drop back down to the E minor root leading out of this verse. The attack that Howie is putting on the strings almost sounds like a pick, but I'm 95% sure he's a finger player, and it will be interesting to see him perform this part to see if he is actually using a pick for all or part of it. When we break into the chorus or the bridge section, there really are only two sections of this song, so you can probably just think of them as A and B, rather than strictly a verse and chorus. In any case, when we get to this section, I do see the ghost of George Harrison looking over Tom's shoulder and smiling. Of course, he wasn't a ghost at this time, but you get what I'm saying. This is such a Beatlesy section, and Tom's phrasing here really, really reminds me of George in a lot of ways vocally. You have the nice slide licks being added in over the bright arpeggiated chord progression with the staccato keyboard part keeping time. It's all very psychedelia flavored in this section of the song, and I love it. And I think the line that really makes me think of George and maybe his work on the All Things Must Pass album is the first iteration of the line, I was starting to ramble on and on. The way Tom sings that passage, and especially the last on, is so very Harrison-esque. After this beautiful lift out of the melancholy A section, we have that keyboard part taking a solo, and it sounds to me like it might be a clavinet or something that's sort of approximating that, with some serious effects tacked on, like a bit of distortion and maybe the bass frequency scooped off to give it that really reedy, snappy tone. And underneath this solo, which is played over the first verse progression, we have Mike Campbell adding in those very simple, understated, but very, very effective licks. After this solo, we go back to another verse section, and there's a really, really interesting little lick that Mike plays that almost sounds like it's out of key, but it's just ever so slightly atonal, I think. And it's quite a thin sound on the guitar, so my guess is that he switched the pickups for that part to whack up the treble and carve off the bass frequency a little bit. It's about the 147 mark when Tom sings Fall in Love With. Go give that a listen. It's very cool, very interesting. Alrighty, folks, it's time for some petty trivia. Your question from last week was this. Which legendary country artist does not appear on 2024's Petty Country Tribute album? Is it A, Dolly Parton, B, Willie Nelson, C, Chris Christopherson, or D, Marty Stewart? Well, Marty Stewart used to perform Running Down a Dream as part of his live set from time to time, but his contribution to the tribute record was I Need to Know. backed as always by his fabulous superlatives, which is a brilliant name for a backing band. Willie Nelson, along with his son Lucas, took on last week's song Angel Dream, and Dolly Parton, of course, performed a touching rendition of Southern Accents, complete with a music video featuring many of Tom's possessions and references back to the song and the album. So this means that your answer is Chris Christopherson. Now, Chris obviously very sadly passed away last year, and I suspect that he may have been too unwell to contribute to the album had he been asked, and I'm not too sure if he was. If I had to pick a Tom song for Chris to cover, though, I would love to hear him taking on something like Spike. Something about the narrative and the playful nature of that song, especially with Christopherson's that sort of gravelly low end that he has, makes me think that he would really have enjoyed it and had a lot of fun with doing that one. I should mention, too, that I'll be jumping on a call next week with my good pal John Paulson to discuss both the Petty Country album and the soundtrack to the Bad Monkey TV show, which is comprised entirely of covers of Tom's songs. We'll also be talking about other covers of Tom's music that we love, and we'll put together an ultimate 10-track Petty covers playlist for you. I'll steal an idea from the My Ultimate mixtape. Your question for this week sticks with the Petty Country release, and is this: which heartbreaker joined the brilliant Margot Price on her version of Ways to be Wicked? Was it A, Mike Campbell, B, Benmont Tench, C, Scott Thurston, or D, Ron Blair? Okay, back to the song. After this verse, we go into another round of the B section. The curious lyrics in this section, because they almost seem to be in opposition to the verses, which feel very much like a judgmental observation on the disappointing behavior of the subject of this narrative, where in the B section, self-doubt seems to creep in, and there's almost a subservient note to the line, I wish you well, I wish you everything and more. And I guess when you've been gaslit by someone, you can often feel as if the breakdown in the relationship is your fault, and it feels like this might be the type of situation that Tom is singing about here. Forgive my ignorance, I was starting to ramble on and on. It's almost like he's accepting blame for the breakdown of this relationship when maybe he really, really shouldn't. After this last verse and chorus, we get a repetition of the first, complete with that different initial chord progression, which stays in the minor mode. My favourite part of this song is between Tom concluding this verse on Somebody Like You and then repeating the last two lines to close. That lick that Mike Campbell plays is just stunning. It has hints of the type of licks that would be peppered all throughout the Mojo album, and I wonder if that part was played on a Gibson Les Paul. Obviously not the same one that he used on Mojo, because that guitar was new and sort of, directed Mike to play in the styles that he did on Mojo. But it does seem that Les Paul imbues Mike's fingers with the same type of sensibility. So I wonder if it is. You know what? I don't know. It's just speculation. The song ends on that fabulous E minor suspended chord that we've heard before on a Heartbreaker song a couple of albums ago. Go on, rack your brains. It's the exact same chord used in the same way to punctuate an ending. Only in this case, it's an actual ending, and in the other song I'm talking about, it's a false ending. You figured it out yet? No? All right, well, I'll tell you next week, maybe. Hope You Never was never performed live, which I do think is a shame, because in an intimate setting, maybe like the Fillmore with three guitarists and Steve Ferroni, this would have been a great deep cut to be able to pull out. Fans would have loved it, I'm sure. It's a fairly dark, bleak cut from a difficult album for Tom, and it fits the timbre of the movie in places, and you can see why it was chosen as one of the songs to transfer over to this release. The production is, as always, absolutely superb. The parts are all expertly crafted and arranged, and Tom's vocal delivery has that quiet confidence that marked his transition from brash young rock star to middle-aged songwriter. Okay, Petty Heads, that's it for this week. Just a short one this week. I think this track is one of those overlooked hidden gems in the Petty catalogue. Does it have the razzmatazz of a Walls or the heartfelt beauty of an Angel Dream? No, but then not every song needs to. I think the composition of this song, and especially that soaring, wonderful Harrison-esque B section, along with the surprising little keyboard solo where a guitar would ordinarily live, elevates this one well above the average. So I'm giving Hope You Never, very confident, and maybe this will be a surprising, 8 out of 10. The Tom Petty Project is a proud member of the Deep Dive Podcast Network. Go check us out at deepdivepodcastnetwork.com. Lots of good stuff there. Go check it out. You can also find the podcast's Seaside Pod Review, a Queen podcast that I do with my very best friend Randy Woods, who just getting back from Arizona. He's been on a little trip down to Phoenix and Tucson down there, having a whale of a time with his good lady wife. You can also check out the Ultimate Catalog Clash that I co-host with my great pal Corey Morissette, who also has another fantastic show in the works that you should all check out called The Power of Positive Geeking, where Corey talks only positively with guests about different movies. Now, I did end up doing a guest spot on that show that will be coming out in a few weeks, but in the meantime, go catch up on back episodes. This is a show that Corey had years and years ago. It was his first podcast that he did, the first one that he co-hosted and sort of conceived on his own, and he's breathing new life into it because he loves talking about movies. Very knowledgeable about it too. That's his background. He works in film, he works in TV and production and directing, all those kinds of things. So go check that out. I'll leave a link in the episode notes for that too. Fantastic podcast, hosted by a fantastic guy. Don't forget to follow me on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, and YouTube at The Tom Petty Project, and on Blue Sky at Tom Petty Project. Go follow, like, subscribe, do all those things, and leave a review. I keep telling you this, and it's okay if you don't have time. Keep talking to me on social media, and I will keep reading out as many of your comments as I can. And as a weekly reminder, the Tom Petty Project is not affiliated with the Tom Petty Estate in any way. So when you're looking for Tom's music, please visit official streaming platforms, or better yet, as I tell you every week, go to your local independent record seller to grab some actual physical media. If you're looking for official merchandise, go to tompetty.com. And if you're looking for merchandise for this show, please go to tompettyproject.com. Don't forget to check out the Tom Petty Nation and Tom Petty Fans Forever groups on Facebook. And go check out Tom Petty Radio on Channel 31 on Sirius XM. Until we meet again next week, keep listening to and sharing Tom's music. Try to be kind. Try to say I love you to someone at least once a day. Stay safe and healthy, and I'll be back with you next week to talk about a song called Asshole by an artist named Beck. And I'll explain next week why I'm phrasing it that way. Bye-bye.